Okay, hi everyone. I'm going to go through some top line opening remarks and then we'll introduce the council members who are on and go into any other introductions for people who are joining once we get through the top line items of business, which will take maybe like 3 minutes. We did enable a waiting room for this meeting and we'll have them moving forward just based on the governor's office security protocols for Zoom, given that we post these on Twitter. So Loretta, if you could take a look and see if there are people waiting, that would be great. And I will admit this person and let's get started. Greetings everyone and welcome to the June listening sessions for the California Truth and Healing Council. Today's session is designated as the Northern Region listening session, and tomorrow will be a regular business meeting of the council with public comment taking place from 3 to 4 p.m. as well as throughout the agenda. My name is Christina Snyder, and I'm a member of the Dry Creek Rancheria Band of Pomo Indians and the Tribal Advisor for Governor Gavin Newsom. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the land I'm joining you from is the homelands of the Patwin peoples. I'm now going to briefly walk through some of the logistics and preliminary business for today's meeting. First, we're recording this listening session and it's available for public participation via Zoom and dial-in. These listening sessions are being held to increase community input specific to the charge of the council, and we ask that you come to these sessions prepared to engage in a thoughtful way that will further the effectiveness of the work. We envision these sessions as ultimately being working sessions that are part of the council rather than just opportunities for public comment. As a reminder, we're taking notes throughout these sessions and will provide monthly summary overviews for the council and public to review, which we aim to release prior to the regular meetings, but may change depending on staff capacity. These summary overviews are not meant to be word-for-word records or minutes of the sessions, but are being prepared to provide a brief overview of the discussions that took place for the convenience of the council and the public. For those interested in following the council, ongoing updates, including listening session recordings and the summary overview documents I mentioned, are available at the California Truth and Healing Council Updates WordPress page at cthc.wordpress.com. You can also get updates for events by following the Governor's Office of the Tribal Advisor on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Listening session recordings are available in full and posted at the CTHC Updates WordPress for those that are interested in hearing detailed discussions and comments. Additional details, including meeting dates, agendas, and background information are available at tribalaffairs.ca.gov/CTHC. And if you need technical assistance during today's session, please contact the Office of the Tribal Advisor email at info.tribalaffairs@gov.ca.gov. If you've not already done so, we'd appreciate if you could update your name so that we could read it clearly, as well as any preferred titles you have so that we're not accidentally not giving you your proper title, and then any organization you come from if you would like to do so. And when we get to the discussion portion of today's meeting, we'd appreciate everybody going on cam if possible. At any point during today's session, you can ask questions by using the raise hand function or simply unmute your line. If you're using the Zoom app, you should be able to raise your hand using the app controls, but you can also use Alt-Y in Windows or Option-Y on Mac to raise or lower your hand. You can also directly message me, Loretta, or Michael, or the group with any comments you have, or let us know that you have a comment, and we'll either read the comment into the session or call on you. If you've called in, you can unmute your line using *6 or email written comments to that Tribal Affairs email as well at your convenience. Once COVID-19 restrictions alleviate, which they are alleviating, we will have listening sessions both via Zoom and in person in meeting locations throughout the 4 geographical areas in the state. So in anticipation of this, if there are community gathering locations that you'd recommend or you'd like to host a session, please reach out to us at info.tribalaffairs@gov.ca.gov to set up an upcoming listening session. And it looks like we've got some folks in the waiting room, so I'm going to go ahead and admit all of them.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anyone, like I don't have any notifications popping up on my end.
Yeah, if you look at the participants list, it'll split it up into waiting room and in the meeting.
No, mine doesn't have that. I think because I'm a backup host.
Oh, okay. Well, I will make you the host now, and that way.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, you see it now? Perfect. Okay. Before we begin, I'd like to remind participants that all of our council members, Loretta and I in the Office of the Tribal Advisor who are staffing this work, and many of you are members of the victim population in need of collective healing. So I ask that you engage with the council, our office, and each other with respect and with your whole heart in a healing mindset. Many of us doing this work are navigating systems that were not built for us to make change that was never contemplated. This in itself takes an enormous amount of patience and emotional integrity, and we're all doing our best to make strides in these spaces. So thank you again for joining us. And first we'll go into brief intros of council members and then anyone else who'd like to introduce themselves. And then we'll go through a brief presentation to get everyone up to speed before opening up into the listening session portion. So I'm gonna hand it off to first the council members. If those on, I see Councilmember Bojorquez, Councilmember Myers, and Councilmember Harper, if you would like to introduce yourselves to the group.
Mishi Stu, Inkatumakam, Isaac. So good day. How's everybody doing? My name is Isaac. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to join us, and look forward to a good listening session this afternoon. Thank you.
Ayuquid Naknau, Frankie Myers. Thank you for showing up and having a conversation. Look forward to the dialogue and hearing fantastic comments.
Open Mikantosh. I'm Joan Harper. I just want to say welcome and thank you for being here today.
Thank you, council members. And if at any time you have questions for the group, please feel free to go ahead and just ask them of the group. I'll also turn it over to Loretta from my office if she'd like to introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Loretta Miranda, and I am a descendant of the Morongo Band of Mission Indians. I am Serrano Cupeño, and currently serving as Chief Deputy Tribal Advisor and Special Counsel for the Governor's Office of the Tribal Advisor. And I'm happy to see we have a larger group today, and nice to see some familiar faces, and looking forward to the conversation.
Great, thank you, Loretta. And Michael Park is on from our office as well. And if you need anything, you can also directly message him. If anyone else would like to introduce themselves to the group this time, feel free. And if you have any thoughts you'd like to share with the group, you can do so at this time. Otherwise, we'll go into the overview presentation so that everybody can get up to speed on where we're at. And just as a reminder for those of you just joining, we did enable the waiting room for this listening session just because of Governor's Office security Zoom measures, but we're not excluding anybody unless Loretta's kicking people out, but or if any of you try to bomb this meeting.
And we have a raised hand from Marisa.
Hello, I just thought I would introduce myself. I am Marisa Sullivan. I'm the tribal chair for the coastal band of the Chumash Nation. This is not my region in terms of the listening sessions that are being provided to us, but I wanted to join in on this one because I know my understanding is we can kind of join in on any, even if it's not our so-called region. So I just wanted to introduce myself in case, you guys have been kind of a set group, and that way you know who I am. So thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to introduce themselves to the group at this time? And you can also just drop something in the chat. Robert, we can't hear you, even though it looks like you're unmuted. Nope. I'm assuming you're saying you're gonna leave and come back or something like that. Okay. Would anyone else like to introduce themselves to the group before we go over? Great, Teddy's on. Okay, then I'm gonna go ahead and go over the very brief presentation, which will lay out how we're gonna structure this listening session so that we optimize open dialogue as well. And then if people have questions along the way, Loretta, could you monitor the chat? And then also feel free to unmute your line if you just want to jump in and you have questions. So I'm going to share my screen.
It looks like we had a hand raised from Cindy, but then she put it back down. So just wanted to note and give space if you wanted to jump in.
Thank you. I just wanted to say I'm honored to be here, and I'm representing the Naromic-Wintu Nation. Our Aboriginal territory is in Trinity County, and I look forward to the collaboration of my people. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you for joining. Okay. So we're going to do a brief overview of where things are at right now. And Loretta, feel free to jump in if I don't capture everything. But for today, we're going to do an overview of the council and its charge. The June council meeting agenda we'll go over. We'll go over any updates that have happened in the last month. And then we will have, we'll open up for listening and discussion if there's anything that anyone came prepared to talk about that isn't part of our questions for the public, or if there's anything that the council members would like to ask of this group before we go into the questions that we prepared. And then we'll go through those questions as well. We do want to make sure we get to the questions. So if we get to a point where we're, about 20 to 30 minutes left, we may, depending on how discussion is going, cut that piece off so that we can at least address the questions and you can fill them in on your own time using the fillable forms. The California Truth and Healing Council is a council made up of representatives from the California Native American tribes charged with bearing witness to, recording, examining existing documentation of, and receiving California Native American narratives to clarify the historical relationship between the state and Native Americans in the spirit of truth and healing. The council will submit a final written report of findings to the governor's office by 2025, which should reflect a holistic understanding, meaning not just from the perspective of an academic or someone from outside the community or the perspective of the state, but really the perspective based on California Native perspectives and experiences of the historical relationship between California Native Americans and the state. And this can include anything from, indentured servitude, slavery. We are coming up on June 10th, so something that might be something we want to talk about at some point. It can reflect kind of anything that we've seen in the beginnings of the state, and the report may also make recommendations aimed at reparation and restoration, and consider how to prevent similar depredations or policies in the future. So both a record that we all agree to, and then also recommendations to prevent and also heal some of the long-standing issues that this council will examine. The council is organized under a charter and is made up of voting members and non-voting members. There are 12 voting members from each of the 4 regions, with 1 seat designated for a non-federally recognized designee in each region. Each region also has an alternate voting member to ensure quorum for action. The public, and this is the all public, the council could choose to go in a different direction, but what we heard from our initial round of consultation was that it was really important for both descendants of the victim populations and descendants and also inheritors and beneficiaries of the perpetrators to be able to engage in a forum like this with a focus on healing the victim population, but an understanding that everybody needs to be at the table in order to move forward. So that's observing, engaging in, attending all meetings of the council, submitting written comments to the council, making oral statements and testimony to the council, participating in interactive dialogues, panel discussions, and informal meetings, organizing and hosting affiliate events. So for example, if there's something that has to do with the mission system or anything that might be outside of the scope of this council, we are happy to partner and elevate those events as well, and then join the work of the subcommittees. This is just kind of an overview of how the council looks, but all of this is like under the umbrella of the council. So if you are a California Native American tribe, we're seeking to begin in-person consultation meetings where your tribe is comfortable. And you can set those up by reaching out to our email, which is provided here, if your tribe is ready to meet in person. We're flexible about the method and mode of meetings, so we could do virtual if that's the preferred method. We could do virtual and then later do in person. We can host you in Sacramento, or we can go where preferred. We don't have many limitations, so if weekends are better because your tribe, everybody works full-time, we're okay with coming out. If you prefer to have someone else be the receiver of the narratives that will be collected, we are happy to work with you the way that you feel comfortable, and then provide you with the recording materials that we would need to be able to incorporate that. Outside of tribal consultation, we're also available to meet with Native American individuals, organizations, and groups at their request. The only constraints on the council meeting is that they can't meet as a full body or constitute anything that would be considered quorum because of open meeting rules, but they're definitely able to host their own meetings, talk to you outside of the general meetings, and so feel free to reach out to them, and we'll be setting up some emails for them so that they have, that you can directly contact them without having their personal information. The next meeting dates for this year, which are, set until the council decides otherwise, if they would like to, schedule a different date, or if they feel like they're in a good place to start meeting in the quarterly structure that's contemplated by the charter, which is a full day of talking circle and a full day of listening, hearing style meeting. And in regions throughout the state are tomorrow, July 23rd, August 20th, September 17th, October 22nd, and November 19th. We anticipate that the executive order that waived some of the in-person meeting requirements will probably be reassessed around September. And so it may be that the council needs to start meeting in person after that point. So we'll be working with the council on figuring out how they want to move forward on that. The agenda for this meeting, and this agenda we may not get all the way through, but wanted to make sure that we have everything on there that the council could potentially need to get in place before moving into the actual work. We'll do our regular welcome, roll call, and then we'll do a traditional opening. We've invited Assemblymember Ramos to do a traditional opening, and then we'll have a brief statement from the governor and a clip of the apology event that took place 2 years ago tomorrow. We'll then, if any council members have thoughts, they can share them at that time, but then we'll move into the business. So we'll approve the minutes for February and April, and then we'll go around with any council member updates, and that's if they've had meetings or if they've engaged with other community members outside of the construct of the council. We'll then go through a draft, like we've done with other drafts. We'll go through the draft of the public engagements and public relations guidelines and process, the council member code of ethics, and respectful engagement in meetings and listening sessions. Council members will then have those drafts to take a look at, think about, and then provide any edits before the next meeting. And then we'll go through the budget update, subcommittees, which include partnerships, which needs subcommittee members, disenrollment specific, recognition specific, and education potentially split into K through 12 and higher education. And then potentially an elders committee that mirrors the youth council. And then any other committees that this group thinks or that the community thinks would be helpful prior to doing the work, which will be, again, potentially setting up issue area specific subcommittees. We'll then generally go through contracting principles and then go over the public and community engagement that we've done in the past month, and then talk about topics for the next meeting and whether we want to change the date. Public comment will start with a hard start at 3 p.m. and go until 4 p.m. or until public comment is over. The budget update is similar to last time. As many of you may remember, last year's budget included $100,000 annually to support stipend for council members and presenters to attend council meetings. Tribal appointees to council get that stipend based on their experience, knowledge, and unique circumstances. And for those council members on the line, we're just finishing up the paperwork that we need to get done to figure that out. So we're hoping that that'll all kind of go through soon. And providing culturally appropriate wellness services for quarterly meetings to provide Native participants with tools to process and heal from ongoing and historical trauma. And then live streaming meetings and transcription of meetings and consultations. And that's to provide and preserve public access to the primary materials for the final report and appendices. And all of that is available on the website. This budget, we requested an additional $350,000 for a total of $450,000 through the end of 24-25 fiscal year, so until June 2025, to support additional work. So research coordination and consolidation. And then, you know, this person will present also to the Truth and Healing Council based on what they'd like to see in the next meeting. And then compilation and composition of a report of findings and recommendations. And so that'll be an ongoing drafting process, and could be multiple people, could be one shop, could be one person, and then also council and office travel for consultations, meetings, and subcommittee work. And this looks like it's going to be approved, but you know, the budget's still getting worked out, and we anticipate it's going to be getting worked out in the next several days. So we'll keep you posted when we have the final budget, and once that's finally approved with the governor and the legislature. General updates from subcommittees. The Academic Partnership Subcommittee met and recommends a targeted outreach to academic partners to refine its approach. So we're putting together a mailing list and trying to figure out who would be the best partners that we can, you know, target to start getting some of the more detailed questions answered. And then they're also in the process of developing a mission and vision statement so that academic partners know how they can plug in and how they can potentially benefit from working on something like this. The Youth Council Subcommittee also met and seeks additional community engagement to address outstanding questions and really seeks youth engagement to understand how they'd like to move forward. And then the Funding Partnership Subcommittee has not yet been staffed, so that's still pending, but we are having, at least staff is having some meetings with the Decolonizing Wealth Project to figure out how they can help plug in and help shepherd this work on the philanthropic side. Other subcommittees currently under consideration include a disenrollment specific committee, a recognition specific committee, an elders committee, and an education committee or 2 committees. So right now we'll stop sharing, and if any of the participants at this time have anything they'd like to share with the group, anything they prepared to discuss just generally, or if the council members have any questions for the group at this time, we'll open up. And then if we get to the point where it's about 2 and we're still in a good discussion, we'll keep going. If we're in a space where we want to get to the questions, we'll move into those. Yes, Chad, if you'd like to.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for having this session. And first, I want to commend Christina for all your good work. I see a lot of your social media posts, so keep that up. That's good, because it seems like everybody in Native land is on social media. So I see you out there. That's a good job on your part. And I appreciate everybody else being here, and Ayukui to Frankie Joe. So I am of Yurok and Maidu and Achamoy ancestry. Right now, my family and I live here on ancestral Kumeyaay land. I work at UC San Diego, and my job is to look for funding to benefit health among California Native nations. And in my previous work, I worked in philanthropy for a decade. I directed the Native Cultures Fund. So I had the great privilege of meeting and interacting with many, many California Native people throughout the state over that decade, talking about culture, language, education. And I worked with many, many Native veterans and their families over the years. So just a little bit of background so that my question is in terms of the actionable steps that can be presented from this council on behalf of us as Native people to either the state, but especially to private companies in terms of potential reparations. I'm an advocate for transformative funding being presented as the goal for this council. We live in a capitalist society, and that means money is often the foundational need for any type of social justice or cultural work, mentorship development. So my hope is that this council, in your wisdom, will consider that and advocate for that, because you have all these Silicon Valley. I live here in San Diego. I see these companies. They are benefiting by being on our ancestral lands that our people, have cared for thousands of years. And so how do we present that to them? How does this council advocate? And then my thought has been, because I've thought about this for a long time, ever since this council was, as a concept, and now it's been created. If you have that transformative funding available as an opportunity, the needs are vast, right? In Native communities, everything is underfunded in our tribal governments. Every education. So where would we focus it? And I would be an advocate, to focus it. We have a really strong cohort of California Native professors in the UC and CSU systems right now. And I know that they've been meeting as a group over the last 2 years. And, these are multi-generational, multicultural individuals. They're all very culturally grounded, and they're in the UC and CSU structures, which are extensions of the state, right? So they're choosing to go into these areas where often they're the only Native person, but they're making such a deep impact in terms of mentorship, in terms of curriculum development. So I would advocate that if we had funding, if I was a rich guy, I'd give each one of those professors, $1 million each, no strings attached, and say, go forth and create and develop, whether it's language, whether it's, federal Indian law, they're all dynamic, but they're in these structures. And because I work at the UC, I'm probably one of the few California Indian people in the UC system right now. I can see that as a barrier. So these are, California Native people that listened. They listened to their elders. They stayed culturally strong. They got their education, but boom, they're in these structures that are non-Native dominated. And if they had funding, instead of being forced to write grants, for their job, or forced to write grants for their work, their cultural development work, their curriculum development, if they had access to funding that was led by Native people, I think that would just be transformative, you know. So thank you for letting me advocate for that.
Thank you. Really wonderful comments, and we really appreciate it. Now I'm going to say cool people because that's what you're labeled as, but I'll allow you to introduce yourself to the group.
Okay, my name is Mary Risling, and I think my grandson used this for a Zoom session. So I wondered why my name didn't show up, but it does. I'm cool. Anyway, so I have been hearing about these efforts, and then this is the first time I've managed to connect. And I just want to say that my background is I'm Hupa York Karuk, enrolled Hupa, and then worked for decades with California Indian Legal Services, and more recently was consulting with the California Department of Social Services. And so a lot of work in the family, domestic violence, and child welfare arenas. And also, because I'm from the North, High Chag, and have had opportunities to be involved with, you know, the war dances that Colleen does and all of these things over the years. A couple of comments I'd like to offer. One is, I'm not the only old person, I'm officially an elder now, with a lot of experience. And there are a lot of now retired lawyers, doctors, educators, writers that have been in the trenches. And so actually finding a way to convene conversations of those people to who have had experience with the history of the last few decades, because a lot has changed in that time. Because I see that you have identified as potential subcommittees, both disenrollment and recognition. And those are two things that are very challenging, especially for a state initiative to attempt to address. But I would really invite you to think about reframing that area of inquiry and maybe make it more identification and status. And I say that because really, I believe you're going to really need to look at work flowing along two tracks. One kind of an ethnic, cultural track and identity, and the other political status. And to be very clear about each of those, because if you are not, you end up simply pitting federally recognized tribes against unenrolled Indians. And that would be a tragedy if that occurred in the context of this effort. So consciously being aware of that and pursuing those, I think, is something I would strongly recommend. And so for, like I say, with identification and status, as a trench worker in the 70s and 80s and 90s, I can tell you that the current approach to recognition, which is inclusion on the Bureau of Indian Affairs list of federally recognized tribes, sovereign nations, sometimes of a handful of people, that didn't exist until the 80s. So before that, especially in California, there were other approaches to identifying Native peoples here and providing services. And those were fairly systematically being dismantled in that same time frame. And so one thing I like to comment on in respect to that process is, in today's world, if Ishi were alive, he would not be an Indian because he is not a member of a federally recognized tribe. And I think everyone can understand the injustice and the immoral nature of that fact. And too many of our Native people find themselves in that circumstance today. So being from the North, Hupa, Yurok, you know, the North Coast area, and Humboldt, and where there are quite a few tribes, many practicing their traditions uninterrupted from time immemorial, but also a large number of federally recognized tribes, I was actually used to a responsiveness from agencies at both the federal and state level. But now I'm in Sacramento and I have been just horrified at what I'm seeing in terms of the lack of access. Everything is fenced. And if you want to be able to get to any kind of traditional gathering or practice, you have to have a letter from a tribal chair or the state agencies won't even talk to you. And it just so happens that I'm positioned so I could do that. And I got to see both an effort as a Native practitioner to engage with state agencies, and then also someone with the support of a tribal letter. And there really need to be, you know, when I say think about identification and status, ways to identify, because I know that non-federally recognized, as folks are called now, Indian people, they'll talk about wanting recognition, but we do have a whole history here of the special case of California, because everybody over the decades has really acknowledged how just, immoral, and unjust the circumstance of Native people in California is. So we do have the Indian Healthcare Improvement Act, Special California definition, and things of that nature that we could kind of look to and say, what are possibilities? Because you can't have a situation where just anybody can say they're Indian. That's going to get you nowhere fast. So you have to have some way, some process for recognition. That one was tied to eligibility, well, California judgment roles, and identification by your community, basically through Indian health clinics. You know, so that's like one type of approach. But anyway, I just wanted to make that comment because I really think that this is a fundamental problem, and unless both tracks advance and whatever recommendations accommodate the concerns of each, it will be very difficult to get out of our own way and advance healing. So thank you.
Thank you. We really appreciate your comments. And I think that from how the council and how we originally envisioned it is that this is, again, like you're speaking to a descendancy-based type of council where recognition status is almost irrelevant. And some of what we've heard from comments is they're urging the council to look at things through a lens of disenrollment and recognition. So I think it could be helpful to hear a perspective of someone who has worked in this field for so long and has seen kind of the issues. And did I freeze? Okay, sorry, everybody was very still. So, and we're maybe gonna have rolling blackouts, so I never know. But I think it would be helpful if we could invite you, if you ever had some time to speak in an actual business meeting as well. Because I think that what you've just said is a really important way to frame all of this work, especially coming from someone who deserves the kind of deference that you have too. And if any council members would like to jump in, you're welcome to.
Well, I'll just follow up though that I'm not the only one. I know that there are a number of people that have been in those trenches for quite a while and have seen things that work and things that haven't worked so well.
We understand that, but also you're the only one who spoke up in one of these meetings. So you're on first, I think, for this from our view. And we would love to hear more about some of the other people that could be helpful with this effort. Because it is based in the history of the work that you and those others, you know, lawyers, historians, you know, people who have been doing this work have done for the last decades. So would really appreciate that input. Loretta, did you have?
I just wanted to note that Chairwoman Sullivan has her hand raised.
Thank you. I'm sorry, so Cool People, what is your first name?
Mary Risling, yeah.
Risling, Mary. I'm overwhelmed by what you just said, because this is something that has been very much a part of what I deal with as tribal chair and what is the Santa Barbara area. Specifically, that's where we kind of originally started the coastal band from, but it actually encompasses we have a lot of different Native people in our group. We're not just a specific one. We made a conscious decision a long time ago to include more than just one. So when you were talking, that has been something that's been really something I deal with all the time. So when Christina was saying earlier that, it'd be good to hear from people who, as you use the term, in the trenches, been at it a long time. There's people like me who are on the other side of that in terms of the actual people who are basically dismissed because my group is not federally recognized. And frankly, we never will be. We do not meet the criteria that is set out by the BIA. So it's been really difficult for us to be involved in some of these really crucial issues that are going on right now in our area, because our area is so, as California in general, so many resources. I've been in a lot of Zooms in the last 2 weeks that are mind-boggling. They deal with the wind energy that's being proposed off of Morro Bay. We're looking at public access to Hollister Ranch, which is historically owned by, I'm going to say, very, very well-off, affluent people, and they managed to keep out the Native people that is their, sacred lands. We're dealing with the Los Padres National Forest because the Pine Mountain and then the Mount Pinos areas are being targeted for logging and other things. We're dealing with the Channel Islands, and that would be the National Park System service to gain more access to the public. There's just a myriad of things that, as a non-federally recognized group of people, we are a non-voice because we're not federally recognized. They don't have to talk to us when it comes to federal government agencies. Now, the state of California, because of the NAHC here, is the only way we get invited to anything because we are listed with them. We are one of the groups. My name, my phone number is on there. And so we do get calls. I do get requests for, consultations. So for you to say that, this is something I've been trying to formulate and pull together myself, thinking, how can this be said? Because this is exactly what we're looking at in the present day. When we're talking about what the mission system did, what happened to the Native people back then, it's carrying through to the people of now, because I am not the right mission recognized per, birth and all that other stuff that some people do. And I'm in there, my ancestors in there, but apparently it's not the right one because we're pushed out by a lot of meetings. And so anyways, I'm not sure if I'm just dumbfounded that someone finally has said something like that. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Okay, if I could just follow up 3 categories. So in the child welfare arena, it's really challenging to get people to appreciate that there are political status and political rights accorded to members of federally recognized tribes and federally recognized tribes. But there also are laws that apply more generally or broadly to Indians. And in California, Indian healthcare improvement is a big one. It's special California definition, so it's descendants of folks on the California judgment rolls. But also, there is another category of folks, which are people who identify as Native or practice what they believe to be a Native cultural or spiritual tradition. And there are actually 3 separate valid groups. And for child welfare, because all these services have to be provided that are culturally appropriate and all that business, I've really been saying you have to acknowledge all 3 of these streams and clearly decide, you know, that yes, we're going with this or not. And I think that's a job for the commission, you know, the commission here. You're going to have to vote and make some calls about how you're moving forward. But I think that acknowledging all 3 of those gives a place for everybody that identifies with a Native tradition. Because a 4th track, which is not Native tradition, are all of the wannabes who claim to be and are the reason we have the Arts and Crafts Act and, you know, I mean, all of those kinds of things, because you can't have people basically appropriating and misusing an identity. So just, you know, think about your columns as you move forward.
Thank you.
If I could follow up on that myself, Mary, what you just said, one of the things that was suggested to me by someone who actually works for the California Energy Commission, I think CEC, when at the time we were talking about the wind energy stuff. And then I went on to ask him about some difficulty we're having here in the community. So anyways, he brought up that out of this Truth and Healing Commission, that this might be where we could address, and maybe this is what's going to happen. And that would have been my question about, I saw on the agenda that there seemed to be this disenrollment and recognition. And I was wondering if that's going to get fleshed out. I'm not really sure what that's about exactly. But in any case, he was suggesting that we might look at having something through this process that we're going through that is along the line of what the federal, what is known as a federal Indian trust responsibility. His suggestion was something that maybe we look at California doing what is something along that line, where the state Indian trust responsibility maybe, or something that somehow, I don't know what that would be, where it's, you know, in essence, you know, as though we're conferred upon that we are recognized by the state. Because I will tell you that even with the being on the you know, Native American heritage list, I still don't get consulted on things because someone else has said, well, they're not real Indians. We've actually been told we're not authentic Indians. Yeah, so it's really grueling and really hard, and it's another part of the whole history that's happened in terms of this whole thing that we're dealing with. Aside from our own ancestors and what happened, we're dealing with present day people trying to make us be non-people, not recognizing us because we're not the right Indians.
So I think maybe I'll add a bit of clarification on the subcommittee, the reasons why it was listed that way. And it wasn't too specifically, well, I think there are folks that would like for a state body to address recognition and disenrollment, but I think from the state's perspective, those are both you know, under the purview of the federal government, or the inherent sovereignty of tribal nations to determine their own membership. And so asking the state or a state body to weigh in on those specific processes and the validity or invalidity of them is not really our lane, and not really a place where we feel that the state has the kind of background, power, or expertise to do much. But there is, and I think that this speaks to the identity and the status issues that Mary raised, where I think what we're hearing and what I'm hearing from folks who are feeling that there are specific things that need to be addressed based on the fact that people are being disenrolled by their own tribes, or that they lack recognition by the federal government, that there's a lens that needs to be viewed, all of this work needs to be viewed through because of lack of status or recognized status, or lack of enrollment. And so that there's a gap where we have California Native people that are not being served based on the history that happened here. And so that's based on the community expression of need. I think that's what is trying to be captured there. But I think that the way that Mary is framing it is a more inclusive way. So just gonna put that out there, and I will stop talking because I'm supposed to be listening here. Additional just comments, questions, concerns at this time, or if anybody wants to introduce themselves and their interest in the group and hopes for what the council can accomplish. If we don't have any popcorn input at this time, we can also go into the questions. Okay, so the questions that we put together are, sorry, was there a raised hand? Oh, yep, go ahead.
Well, just one more general comment, which is the presence of state representatives. You know, the experience that we recently had with state parks was horrible. And on the one, I mean, they just kind of shined us on, didn't show up for meetings when approached as individual practitioners. And we really couldn't get a response. And then we got a tribal chair letter, and it was like 3 days later, 3 of them show up, special meeting, you know, and that's just really upsetting because, you know, Chag is right, economics speak, and monetary resources are important and should certainly be thought about. But practitioners are often the real Indians, the folks that are carrying on the traditions and values of their people. And when you can't get access to public lands, when things are fenced off and nobody will talk to you. And I was telling these people, you guys, I applaud you for working with the tribes in the region. That is so important. But you also should have processes for dealing with individual practitioners, because that is so important in terms of accessing traditional areas, possessing, you know, the regalia and implements of your ceremonies, you know, those kinds of things. And that is a crying need for healing, is to really support and strengthen the ability to engage in those traditional practices. So all those state agencies have some authority now, and they should be at the table needing to examine their own processes, and then always be sure that they are accommodating, not just, because, you know, the comment about disenrollment, you might get disenrolled from Dry Creek, but you're still a Pomo. And there was no, you know, Dry Creek or Hopland or whatever before, you know, the 80s, or, you know, when those little rancherias were being formed. So that's a piece that finding ways to accommodate, I think, is just really important. And as now an old person, I'm saying, I just, people come to me and they ask for instruction and guidance on how to make things and traditional items. And the biggest initial problem is, how do you access natural areas to gather? And it's really challenging.
Natural areas without pesticides, without, yeah, agreed. Chad?
So if I can segue into that, in terms of this council approaching philanthropists, let's approach them for money to buy back our ancestral lands so that we can bypass the state. If we own it, we dictate who can go on there. We dictate if there's no pesticides, and bypass the state. So in terms of philanthropy, I'm talking about this council approaching billionaires, not like $10,000 grants, not even $100,000 grants. Let's talk to people with transformative wealth. They're out there. They're out there. They just haven't been presented the opportunity that I think this council can represent in terms of, when you have practitioners like Mary and her family and can have, this documented need, but let's buy the land, let's just, go that route. I mean, the state is always they're always going to deny us. And to me, the way to, bypass that is through education, which is why I advocated, those Native educators are out there, they can educate the next generation in the state park, right? Or we buy the land back and Native people, we have it in that way.
One thing I would suggest,
okay.
one thing.
Just one little follow-up, which is, that's where disenrollment comes in. I mean, these are great ideas, but that status and identity issue are just fundamental to how we can move forward with healing. Because really, as a child, my grandfather drove us up the Klamath and said, these are the ancient village sites. These are where certain things happened. And then he was really encouraged by this next generation of scholars and lawyers and whatever. And he talked about, you can get it back. And I said, well, okay, that's great. We get it back. But then what do we do with it? Disenroll everybody so that only I can use it. So that's like just a really important piece, is coming up with who we are, who Native people are in all of the colors of the rainbow, and what those distinctions might mean, but at the same time, trying to be as inclusive as possible.
And two pieces on that. One thing that that is in play so part of this, I think, to address and just to think about, to address the issues of status, assuming that you could figure out a way to easily, confirm those types of groups that Mary, you mentioned, for purposes of gathering and sacred use and the like, and traditional use. There's certain public use restrictions on property rights, like beach access. Like, you have to have public access for certain things, and certain waterways are always public access because that's just the law. But there's not really something for traditional use that predates statehood or predates, Mexico, or predates all of the other flags that have been over these lands. And so that, I think if you're going to do something transformative, you've got to transform the concept of current property rights and usage, because even asking for a landowner to grant an easement so that you can access your gathering or your cemetery or your sacred place, you may have to pay for that. And it may not be cheap. So just something to think about. And then the second piece is in the land buyback stuff. a lot of what I've seen, at least in private practice with tribes that are trying to buy back lands or are trying to buy access or are trying to get those easements, is that they're being extorted because it's, you know, within an area that could potentially go into trust. So it's high value to tribes to be able to get those lands if they're federally recognized, since they're adjacent to their existing trust lands. And so, you know, I don't think that there's anywhere in the law that prevents someone from tripling the price if they know that it's even like a straw man for the tribe purchasing that land. So it's another thing to think about if there are these mechanisms that, you know, we may want to think about how we structure the law in terms of tribes even getting access, and then also, or like Native people getting access. I apologize, that was a slip. But then if there are buybacks or even land trusts that are communal properties for tribal use, that, you know, you can't, kind of like in emergency times where you can't, you know, upsell people just because all of the houses are gone. Anyway, just something to think about.
Well, here's just one cheap little quick suggestion. So some of the folks down here were interested in learning how to make maple bark skirts. And so we drive around and go, there's some maple, you know, and start scoping out where the maples are. And they're all behind fences. And so my husband's saying, well, you know, maybe we can get a hold of PG&E. Up north, it's timber companies. You know, it's like there are, so if there were not just philanthropists, but partnerships that give them a tax write-off or something, you know, and get some access for some of these types of practitioners and a process to engage with. But you always need to be able to identify that the person is eligible. And then also, yeah, there needs to be some kind of contact or touch point that, you know, you would coordinate it through. So anyway, I think there's a whole spectrum. There's the land back, and there's, before everybody forgets how to do it, can we just get some access to things?
And actually, and I'm just thinking, I mean, if we can't buy land, why, I think maybe could there be this radical idea that the public system, the park system, all the land that is within the state run, maybe they ought to be thinking about, you know, giving some of that back, putting some of the park system proportion, you know, a portion of that. And I understand that it's like this crazy idea of giving, and there's actually someone who's putting that idea forth that all the national parks should be given back to Native people. And that's a radical idea and scary, you know, to most people. But it seems to me that it always has amazed me that the National Park Service, the department that I've had to deal with here in the Ojai area, it's interesting because on their mission statement, I think, or somewhere, they talk about being stewards of the land and that they are keeping, you know, taking care of it. And yet, you know, we're not allowed to do that when historically we have been stewards of the land. We know how to take care of things and we know what to do with things. And it's just like, we're not allowed to do that. And it just seems as though Native people, if they were possibly given part of that, maybe this is the real thing of seeking to do some healing here by the state of California. You know, Governor Newsom, maybe he could take a look at that, you know, possibly making it possible for Native people in the areas to have a part of the park. And yeah, it's just a thought.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Pam Gonzalez. I know it says Tracy, but she set it up for me. I'm Wintun Compound Hutchman. My imprint is Wintun. And I'm a mom and a grandma, and I'm one of the older people in this group also. I wanted to comment on that finding land for us. And what we just recently had a meeting a couple of weeks ago with the university's NRS people over at Stebbins Canyon, over by the areas, Lake areas up in Northern California. And we're in talks with them. We just had our first meeting, but they're wanting to work with natives from the homeland. And so this is one of the things that are kind of in the back of our mind, that every university, I think, in California has properties all over the place. I was shocked when I found out that UC Davis has like 6 different reserves. A small one up in Shasta, I don't think that's a real reserve. It seems like it's just a little small site, but 5 other reserves throughout the counties. And so that's kind of something that we were thinking of looking at and asking for, is give us some of that. It was ours. And I'd also like to thank Shag Lowry and who else mentioned it, but they brought up health issues, and that health and education are the areas that I try to advocate for in a lot of things. And today I wanted to bring up health again. One of the things I notice is that we have a lot of, we don't have enough of our own people trained. Fortunately in Woodland at IHS, we do have a native physician, and she's from up north. I think she's here, but anyway, so we do have her, but there's only maybe 3 other natives at the clinic at Woodland. And so I'm wondering if there's something that this council could do about encouraging and providing more education, maybe not so much a physician and nurses. I'm just thinking some of these young people that just needed a second chance, that maybe even coming out of rehab, coming out of some bad situations, or something like in training could be offered to them. One of the courses that, trainings that we had was a class called Matter of Balance class, and they sent the public health nurse to get trained back east for that. She came back, and I have nothing against the program, is wonderful, and we've all really benefited from it. But she came back and she trained the MAs, and the MAs taught the class. But why aren't we training our own here instead of spending IHS money, sending them off to get trained, non-Indians to get trained, and then they come back and have well, one was non-native and one was native that did get trained to do the MOB class, so we've had quite a few of those. But I see that happening, and why can't we also have people trained to be assistant physical therapists? Maybe this will motivate them to go on to higher education, but just to open that door. Not everybody comes out of the situation and is ready to hit the 4-year college or university and leave home. And to pay for those things. And I liked what last week Robert Levi said something about checking the box. And so I think earlier I heard somebody mention something about some celebrations or something that, Native American Heritage Month or something to that, not specifically, but something that led me to believe that's what we're talking about. Those are just one and done things. And that, to me, that was like what Robert said last month, was just check the box and then they're on to something else. We need to have education and health ongoing every day in that classroom. I'm just going to say it every time that I get a chance to come on, is to say I think it should be mandatory that homeland history be taught at every university and every school district in California. We are ignored. We're at the bottom of the list, the bottom of the pile. They don't even know who we are. My visit to Stebbins Canyon, I went and took a picture of their sign. It said, Native Americans have been here for 11,000 years. One sentence. Couldn't even say who we were. Couldn't say when to invite them. On pies and county statistics, sometimes they mention if it's really bad, they mention us. But if it's just like a population or somewhere other. So these are all pieces of things that were just ignored and overlooked. And I think I'd like to see the state or the governor really consider providing programs for these Native people to get our Native young people, older people, to get trained in some of these courses that we could do. We could do ourselves at our own clinic. I've asked the director if he would allow training for the non-Native staff. And it's like, well, you know, everybody's pretty sensitive and about the issues Native people have. Well, okay, I don't know what to say to that. You know, I guess that was a no. So anyway, I'll let that go, and thank you for those comments that you made about education and health and things. I thank you for saying that. Thank you for saying all of those things. I guess it's the amen and the hallelujah. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your comments. And then one thing, and I don't know if it's made it into the budget, but one thing I do want to point out, that if it does end up being something good, it may be something that this council wants to put in its recommendations as supporting ongoing, is the budget proposed growing the UC's Prime program, which it's focused on serving underserved communities. And so it would support American Indian specific health programs for medical students. And so just one thing to point out, and we can look into that a bit more and see if it got approved and see what those outcomes are too.
I would like to ask is if that's a UC system, does that mean it's, you know, young people who have been accepted into that level? Because there's an awful lot of community, you know, college, you know, Native people who can't afford or can't get in or get accepted into the UC system, especially if they're not, you know, recognized. So I think, I hope that that's, you know, part of being considered if you're talking about that. I'm going to be looking up that Prime program to see what that's about. So thanks for bringing that up.
Additional comments, questions for the group? And then another thing, just to kind of tee off of that was in the proposed budget that I'm not quite sure if it made it in, was to invest in Humboldt State so that it would be the third polytechnic school, and that would increase investments in some of those other types of medical tracks. So just another thing to kind of point out. And I know that they have a pretty large Native population that they serve. So that could also be something that could be used as a model if that works out in the budget. But we can take a look and report back on that. Additional comments, perhaps the council could advocate for a free ride in the UC or CSU systems. And this is something that we've actually discussed in other contexts outside of the council. And I think that the UC Advisory Committee on Native American, I'm not getting it right, but it's the Native Advisory Committee that advises the UC Office of the President, has had some of these discussions. And I think that this council, you know, could take that up, especially given that, you know, as Chair Sullivan mentioned, a lot of the UCs, and I'm less familiar with the CSUs, but a lot of them are land grant institutions. So they've benefited from the divestment of Native lands without necessarily providing proportional ongoing support for those communities. So I am going to, unless folks have more comments, just very quickly put the link to the questions that we had in the chat so that people can answer them on their own time, and then I'll go over them just so that people can think about those questions. Oh, great. Thank you, Michael. So I'm going to very quickly in the last couple minutes just go through those. So I'll share my screen real quick. Okay. So the critical questions is how to scope the work. So the council's charge is to receive, examine, and report on the history of the state's negative actions towards tribes through the Native lens and experience, and recommend remedial measures that can be taken. So what early state actions should the state be most accountable for from the Native perspective? What state actions have been most harmful to today's California Native peoples? And are there community organizations or conferences that are aligned with the council's work that the council can plug into? And as a reminder, you can go to that site and do the fillable form, or you can email us, or you can in the chat right now start putting your thoughts. From the Academic Partnerships Subcommittee, what should the goal of the final report be? How should the council frame its research agenda? How can the council be most inclusive in incorporating research and narrative into this work? Are the preferred academic partners the council should be speaking with, or preferred models? How should the council archive testimony received? Where should the data and information live? And are there higher education serving community organizations or conferences that the council can plug into? And on the archival piece, the question is coming up because in the context of the Maine Wabanaki Council that came to speak with the, or commission, sorry, that came to speak with the council, they mentioned that it was preferred that the state don't hold that information because of like the historical issues and the lack of trust there. But so are there other places? Is there another model? Is there something like, you know, the UCs or the CSUs should hold on to it in perpetuity and they're required to, you know, share this in a digestible format in some sort of mandatory class for all incoming freshmen, something like that. How can the council best engage with California Native youth population? What platforms and messengers? And are there key partners that the council can work with to reach Native youth? Are there tribes, for example? Are there, you know, GONAs? Are there different health organizations? Should the Youth Council Subcommittee be modeled on the council structure or something else? Should the Youth Council be focused on California Native youth or open-ended? How should the council define youth? Are there any ongoing youth groups or meetings in the community that the council can plug into? And are there any youth graphic artists that the council should work with on promotional materials? Or should we put it out for, you know, an open solicitation for youth graphic artists? On funding partnerships, what are the needs of the community in engaging in the work of the council that are not currently funded? So for example, if you're taking time out of your day to day to feed into the council and you feel like that should be appropriately funded, what does that look like? How can we turn that into an ask to philanthropy? If from the tribal perspective, you have someone that you want to be more actively engaged in archival and historical research in your tribe to consolidate information for this council, what does that look like? Are there any recommended communications partners that the council may want to work with to spread the word? And then for contracting, what should the council and staff be mindful of when seeking third parties to do the work of the council? And here we're mindful of the fact that, you know, there are extractive organizations, businesses, and want to make sure that we're elevating the work of the council in a way that isn't actually counter to the council's charge and mission. And are there models that have worked that the council and staff can look to? So I'm going to stop sharing, and if there are any final thoughts, we can have some final thoughts or any thoughts on the questions we asked. Or if you didn't want to answer the questions and something else has come up in your brain that you'd like to share with this group, we can take that too. Or if there are people who came and they wanted to say something to the council, there's also an opportunity tomorrow at the meeting from 3 to 4 p.m. and then throughout the agenda as well.
I'll go ahead and go. Can I ask the council, as it exists until 2025, to me has more of a, I mean, it has the attention of the governor's office. It's there, it's tangible. My fear is to wait until the end of the council's mission to create a report or to create advocacy or action items. Like, is there a way to stagger that? Like, could they do that every year? And while the council is there and tangible and in the mindset of, you know, I would hate for them to do everything at the end of 2025. And then if their mission expires, who's going to be there to help, you know, coordinate that? Or are we looking at building up another organization that could further the recommendations that they're going to have?
I think all of that is open-ended. So the council is charged with having annual drafts, or at least reporting annually to the governor's office on what's been done. And I think that recommendations could be incorporated in that. We're also here the whole time. So if there are things you'd like the governor's office to start doing or the state to start doing, we can start feeding that into our policy priorities as well. And the council can charge us with that, or I guess request us with that. So I think that everything is possible. And then the council itself kind of can determine what they want to do. And so, you know, from my perspective, which is honestly limited, you know, the council itself, the timeline was put in place so that there is a benchmark for a deliverable, understanding that it might not be, you know, it. And that, like, at that point, hopefully there's enough of an understanding of what still needs to be done that the council can either choose to extend its charge, can choose to put something in statute, or can choose to parlay it into something that exists outside of state government, understanding that there's some limitations with how state government operates. So I think everything's kind of possible is the short answer, which is a non-answer.
No, that's great. I would advocate that we should have something like this in perpetuity. I mean, it took generations for all of, you know, the challenges that we face to be put in place. It's not going to just happen in 5 years to counteract all of that. That seems to me like an artificial state-imposed deadline. I would encourage, you know, the council to, I mean, let's tell the state that we want to be here forever in this way. Why not? I mean, that way then they're mentoring, you know, you can, why have a youth council, right? You know what, when you're not a youth, you can, where do you go? Well, if this council still exists, you can slide right into those spots. The perfect opportunity to, you know, to share the wisdom and experience of the current council with the younger generation. I would really advocate for something like that.
Thank you. So we've got about 2 minutes. I'm going to open it up. Robert, you've unmuted. Did you want to share something? Okay, we still can't hear you. Yeah, okay. So don't do that. Put something in the chat, or we'll see you tomorrow too. I'll turn it over to any of the council members if they have any final thoughts or anything they'd like people to think about in the next month or the next day. So just feel free to jump in, council members. Councilmember Myers.
I just want to make a comment and say thank you for the dialogue today, folks that joined in to have the discussion. Very, very happy to hear these types of conversations. And I think this is exactly the feedback the council needs to help us moving forward, keeping our eye on what needs to happen now, but also looking at the future and the future of the council, support that 100%. I just want to say thank you. This was a fantastic dialogue. Really appreciate all the comments.
Councilmember Harper.
Yes, I also want to say thank you. I think this is the best meeting yet, and I hope there's more to come, and I appreciate everyone who is here, and participated. Thank you.
And Councilmember Bojorquez.
Yes, I do also want to say thank you. We had the largest turnout for our listening session and such great dialogue from everybody. There's so much. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to share with us your thoughts, your wisdom, your experiences. This is exactly what we need to be able to continue to move forward. So thank you. I encourage you all to continue to join us on our listening sessions and in our business meetings. Thank you so much. Shururu.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for your time. Thank you, council members, for joining, and we will see you all tomorrow. Take care.
Sure.